So a couple weeks ago, I was driving back from service with my family, and sometimes my mom likes to put on NPR on the car radio, so we were listening to NPR on the car radio as we were driving home. And it was funny because there was this interview that came on with a lady named Drew Faust, I think that's how you pronounce her last name, who is most famously known for being the first president of Harvard University, which is an Ivy League here in the States. And she's also an author of, some books surrounding the Civil War, but she was just talking about how history should make us feel uncomfortable and was sharing sort of her background. And it was funny because, during the interview, she was talking about her upbringing and specifically her mom. And me and my siblings started kind of like busting out laughing because she was kind of roasting her mom, and it almost got a little disrespectful in a way. Part of me was like taking notes because it was like the way she roasted her mom was like low-key kind of eloquent, but still like very disrespectful. And I was like, listen, when I'm out in the world and I need to roast somebody or put them in their place, I need to learn how to do it eloquently. Like this lady, like she was saying things like, I don't believe my mom had the analytical capacity to think beyond, like it was kind of like, it was tea, it was definitely tea. And I remember my mom was laughing and she was like, y'all better not ever talk about me like this when I'm going off of this earth, because she was talking about her mom who passed. But she seemed to have this disgruntlement with her mom because her mom, before she became a mother, was a really accomplished horsewoman. And she talks about, how, after she sort of settled down and got married and moved to Virginia, she settled in a place that she didn't love. And she ended up giving a lot of the things that made her happy and made her unique away for the sake of her children. And she talked about this idea by a woman named Betty Friedan, I hope I'm pronouncing her name right, which was this idea of forfeited self. So it's a quote that Betty Friedan uses in this book called The Feminine Mystique, I believe, where she talks about this sort of self-destructiveness that occurs within American housewives, where it's not so much just about women having equal opportunities when it comes to paying and jobs, but also having the opportunity for self-expression and being a human being and not falling in this trap that I think a lot of women can do, where when they have their children, their whole identity starts to center around being a mother, and they're not able to sort of still hold on to their unique qualities, have their own moments of self-peace, their own hobbies, their own interests, their own identities outside of being, a mother and a housewife. So still, keeping connected with who they are as a self and not getting lost in their children. And so the lady Drew Faust, who was doing the interview, was just talking about, her mother really put forth focus in sort of sacrificing herself for her children. And her being the child, she was saying how she would kind of like talk mess with her brother, like, I wish mom would get a life. Like, she's so involved with us because she doesn't have anything going on with her. And so she kind of expressed this almost like disgust for her mom not having her own sense of identity. And so I brought this point up because I really liked that term coined, which was forfeited of self. I don't necessarily want to talk about what it means to necessarily give up your identity, but I want to talk about what it means to forfeit yourself in the idea of self-sabotage. I feel like we are in our own way of blocking the blessings that are intended for us to have. I feel like sometimes we have, thought patterns and behaviors, habits that we have implemented into our lives. And because we're not able to self-reflect or course correct, we are the mountain. There's a book that's on my reading list for this year, which is The Mountain Is You, which had like raving reviews. But sometimes I think we are our own mountains that are stopping us from reaching our full potential because we're self-sabotaging. And so today I want to explore what that looks like, what happens when you self-sabotage, and how that leads to forfeit of self, losing your identity because you are not living up to the potential that the God of Israel put into you. And so I want to explore, what does it mean to self-sabotage? What are some of the behaviors that a lot of us have that, are allowing us to give up on ourselves, and end with some solutions and just some brainstorming of how we can course correct this so that we can reach our goals, so that we can achieve what we intend and go out for, and to live up to our potentials as Israelites. Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of 66 Books, where we use the Bible as a framework to discuss how to level up our lives using Israelite spirituality. Today we are flipping to the book of Numbers just to really discuss and define what self-sabotage is. How do you know when you're self-sabotaging and getting in the way of your own blessings? And also I want to delve into, effective solutions to help with self-sabotaging. But before we get into that, I do just have a few shout outs and, a moment of gratitude that I would like to give out to some supporters. I would like to thank Lindsay Smith for our last episode's donation. We always appreciate so much support on this channel. So, in addition to the likes, comments, subscribes, and donations, we truly appreciate it. And so I just wanted to thank Lindsay Smith for that. I also want to thank all of you that have been commenting. Again, it's so encouraging to see you guys liking the episodes, to even get some wisdom from y'all, because y'all be giving me some things to think about. I think in my next episode, I might even share some of those words of wisdoms that I've learned from you all, but I just love that community aspect. And then I also want to call out the UK branch, okay? Because I've been seeing y'all out there in the comment section quite a lot. I don't know. I need to know the tea. Is there some sort of challenge going on? Because y'all have been super consistent with the comments across the board for the nation. So I do want to call out the UK branch. Thank you so much for the support for 66 Books episode. But also I see y'all in the comment section for this channel, and I love it. It's an inspiration to me to go back and make sure that I'm commenting and staying up to date with supporting our nation. So with that said, I want to go ahead and dive into today's discussion. And I want to start off by defining what self-sabotage is. And I think the best starting point for this will be to go ahead and just delve right into the scripture. So we're going to go ahead and do just that. Let's turn to Numbers to get into what self-sabotage is and what it may look like in our lives. And they went and came to Moses and to Aaron and to all the congregation of the children of Israel unto the wilderness of Paran to Kadesh, and brought back word unto them and to all the congregation, and showed them the fruit of the land. And they told him and said, We came unto the land whither thou sentest us, and surely it floweth with milk and honey, and this is the fruit of it. Nevertheless, the people be strong that dwell in the land, and the cities are walled and very great. And moreover, we saw the children of Anak there. The Amalekites dwell in the land of the south, and the Hittites, and the Jebusites, and the Amorites dwell in the mountains, and the Canaanites dwell by the sea, and by the coast of Jordan. And Caleb stilled the people before Moses, and said, Let us go up at once, and possess it, for we are well able to overcome it. But the men that went up with him said, We be not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we. And they brought up an evil report of the land which they had searched unto the children of Israel, saying, The land through which we have gone to search it is a land that eateth up the inhabitants thereof, and all the people that we saw in it are men of great stature. And all the congregation lifted up their voice and cried, and the people wept that night. And all the children of Israel murmured against Moses and against Aaron. And the whole congregation said unto them, Would God that we had died in the land of Egypt, or would God we had died in this wilderness? And wherefore hath the Lord brought us unto this land, to fall by the sword, that our wives and our children should be a prey? Were it not better for us to return into Egypt? So I chose this scripture because I think it is an excellent example of what self-sabotage looks like and its consequences when we have it in our lives and don't know how to stop it or be proactive about it. So to define self-sabotage, there's this book called Stop Self-Sabotage, in which this Dr. Judy Ho defines self-sabotage as this biological response that we have that explains some of our self-destructive behaviors. So for my avoidance out there, you're probably gonna resonate with this definition. Have a tendency to be an avoider too, so this really resonated with me, but I want to go back to the sense of, a biological response. The things that we feel, our feelings, whether that's happiness, sadness, anger, etc., are put in place so that we know when it's time to protect ourselves, so that we know when a threat has arisen. And so when it comes to these moments of self-destructive behavior, self-sabotage, forfeit of self, what's happening is a goal is being put in place. And you know that feel-good feeling when you set a goal and you've mapped out your life plans for the year, the next 5 years. You feel really good, right? You feel really accomplished. Well, that's something that's happening on a biological level. There's dopamine being released when you create those goals. However, when it's time to complete them, sometimes fear of failure can come creeping in. And because fear is tied to a biological response for us to protect ourselves, we tend to avoid completing the task to have a sense of security for a short time feeling of safety. And so this is literally what happens in the story when spies are sent out to do a scope of the land, and we have the false report of the spies come in. So they go out to this land, it's flowing with milk and honey, it's flourishing, but they see the people and they see that they dwell in the land, that they're strong. It says the Jebusites, the Hittites, the Canaanites, all of this, they're out there. And there's a moment of self-doubt. So the goal was set that they were going to go scout the land, but once they saw what it would take to tackle it, that fear crept in, right? And so they ended up thinking in this self-sabotaging way, this self-destructive way. And so they present an evil report unto the land, a false report. And because of that, it's like that fear is a domino effect. And so it started to trickle into the other children of Israel, and they start to murmur against their leaders ordained by God, and even say, is God of Israel delivering us just to have us die out here in the wilderness? We should have went to Egypt. We should just go back to Egypt. I'd rather be enslaved than to go fight these people and take over this land. And this is, again, just a prime example of the consequences of self-destructive behavior and when you're not aware. The spies limited what they were able to achieve and accomplish by letting their fear take hold and consume them. Instead of thinking about their past experiences with the God of Israel, the way the God of Israel delivered our forefathers time and time again, even coming out of Egypt, and using that as proof that they could do this, having that confidence that Caleb had, right? When he was like, we can do this, that courage that we see later on even David has. They let the fear stop them. And it's really interesting because today I was actually talking to someone and she was like, have you ever heard of the acronym of FEAR, what it stands for? And I was like, no, I've never heard of that. And she was like, you need to look it up. And I looked it up and I found this acronym, which is FEAR, which is, fear as in false evidence appearing real. So much of what holds us back is based off of hypothetical situations, self-doubt and worry about things that have no solid basis or founding in our lives. And so it's very important that when we talk about moments of self-sabotage, that we also recognize what holds true in those moments of fear and what does not. so that we can have those moments of courage to overcome those instances of self-sabotage. And as always, I think it's so important to, again, just like connect the scriptures to real life. And so when I talk about, our responses of self-sabotage, I'm not just talking about, the God of Israel gives you a task to do and the fear or self-doubt that you has, stops you from getting in the way. I consider self-sabotage to be things like procrastination, fear, as we talked about, lack of self-awareness, so moments where you're bringing up excuses, blaming others, not taking the time to heal from past experiences and trauma. I also consider self-sabotage as prioritizing short-term over long-term. Before, I was talking about that tendency to avoid. And a lot of times when I think of avoidance, I think procrastination is a good example, because you're so stressed and paralyzed by what you have to do that fear starts to creep in. And so in order to get that short-term dopamine and to feel good really quickly in the now, you decide to push it off. Or, I won't have that conversation until later. Or I'm not going to do my homework until tomorrow because I just can't deal with it. And so you feel really good in the moment because you don't have to deal with it. But what happens is that is piling up. That problem is piling up for later, and it can explode in the long term. And so to me, that's a moment of self-sabotaging behavior. Like I said, I'm an avoider, so this is something that comes naturally to me. But like I said, not being self-aware is also self-sabotage. So for me, I have to be aware that as an avoider, that's my tendency. So I have to prioritize long-term over short-term. And then another thing that I think is example of self-sabotage that I think a lot of people have, especially in our community, is not asking for help, being overly ambitious, and overthinking. I think a lot of times we want to be strong, and some of the ideals of the West come into play when we think about, individualistic society. I have to create success on my own. I have to figure things out on my own. I'll never forget Elder Dexter mentioned this a long time ago, and I remember it was either a Friday night message or a Saturday message a few years back, and it really made me sit back and think. He was like, society always pushes this idea of being, strong and independent and being able to do things by yourself, but that's unrealistic. You need people to help you get through life. I think in, my past episode about, community, the importance of community and unity, an epidemic that's happening here in the United States is loneliness, and that's contributing to mental health issues, actual physical health issues, and people are, harming themselves and having a really hard time because they are alone and they are not asking for help. So that's another form of self-sabotage. I know some of you all are thinking wait, girl, did you just say overly ambitious? Huh? And so what I mean by overly ambitious is I think another form of self-sabotage is when we put super high expectations for ourselves that are unrealistic, knowing what we know about ourselves. Sometimes we have this ideal version of ourselves in our heads, and we just want to jump ship and start waking up at 5 a.m. tomorrow, doing 2-hour exercises every 6 days of the week, followed by a 3-hour Bible study, working, 8 hours of the day, coming home doing another hour of exercise. We want to do everything all at once. And so sometimes being overly ambitious and not knowing yourself is also self-sabotage. Take the time to get there. And so, I share all those examples of self-sabotage, not to overwhelm you and make you think oh my gosh, I do every single one of these, Rachel. How am I ever gonna get over this mountain that is me? But to, one, make you aware of some of the things that are coming up in your life repeatedly that are limiting what you can achieve, but to also remind you that you have the power to rewire your brain and the actions that you take to stop some of those limiting actions, some of those self-destructive behaviors. We're gonna get a little sciencey up in here, okay? But hold on with me because this is really important. But when I talk about rewiring the brain, I specifically want to define this thing which is called neuroplasticity. And so neuroplasticity is the ability of neural networks in the brain to change through growth and reorganization. So I want you to think of what I said before. This is the ability for you to rewire your brain. And I want to use an example. So there's this idea or thing that has been found in scientific research, which is that when you engage in practices that increase your feelings of happiness, what you are doing is increasing the activity in your brain's left prefrontal cortex. So I want you to think, like, maybe you've started to implement a habit where you get up in the morning, you make your favorite cup of tea. Let's do like the mint Moroccan green tea from Trader Joe's because that's bomb. You make your favorite cup of mint tea and you get your cute little notebook and your pen and you just take time to write a gratitude journal. And that is what's bringing you happiness in the morning. What happens is as you continue to feel happy, you actually strengthen that activity that's happening in your brain's left prefrontal cortex, and you start to solidify brain pathways that make it easier to replicate that feeling of happiness. So it's this idea that when you start to do things consistently, habits that are pouring into you and making you feel happy, it starts to become easier to access happiness in your life. And so I want you to think about that. I want you to think about what that means in terms of the new positive habits that you can implement into your life to increase the access you have to feeling happy in your life and at peace, but also what that means in terms of self-destructive behaviors. If you are unaware of those negative thoughts, those negative behaviors that you have, they are constantly creating activity in your brain that are forming pathways to make it easier for you to access those feelings of sadness, those feelings of depression, right? And so this is super profound because, discussions of neuroplasticity are, opening up the doors for conversations of improving mental health, changing unhealthy habits to improve experiences of lasting happiness. And it reminds me of this really excellent podcast. I'm looking at my notes now to make sure that I get the title correct, but I highly recommend, highly recommend you watch the podcast, The Diary of a CEO. They had this episode called Doctor and Therapist to the World's Superstars, Justin Bieber, Miley Cyrus, Bella Hadid. It's an interview with Daniel Amen. That episode is so good when it talks about the behaviors that impact our brain, the way that we think, our mental health, and the actions that arise unconsciously in our lives. And what I love about that episode is Daniel Amen talks about sort of like the pillars that contribute, to your brain health. And he includes spirituality in one of those pillars, which showcases that spirituality can have a benefit when it comes to your brain health. Again, think about that neuroplasticity, rewiring your brain. When it comes to rewiring your brain for the betterment of your life, spirituality is going to be key, guys. It's going to be key. And that's what I love about that podcast is he includes that in his pillars of health, which I think again is just another reason why we need every type of career in the nation. We need scientists, researchers, doctors to explore things like the impact that spirituality has on our health and benefits, because so many times we've had testimonies from brethren and experiences in our life that really confirm its improvement. But, I highly recommend that. But, I want to now transition into what are some of the solutions for this self-sabotaging behavior. We've already gone over the impact of what these self-destructive behaviors do. It impacts us so deep. It goes into our brain biologically. Now, what does it mean? Now that I'm aware of some of maybe the tendencies that I have to be self-destructive, what solutions are there to overcome this, to be proactive and accomplish what I want? And so I want to finish out Numbers in this story of the 12 spies to really discuss, what happens when we don't address our self-destructive behaviors, when we continue in this idea of forfeit of self, of losing ourselves to our fear and our self-sabotaging ways, but also what can happen when we decide to be proactive about it, when we decide to make a change. So let's get into it. And Joshua the son of Nun, and Caleb the son of Jephunneh, which were of them that searched the land, rent their clothes. And they spake unto all the company of the children of Israel, saying, The land which we passed through to search it, it is an exceeding good land. If the Lord delight in us, then he will bring us into this land and give it to us, a land which floweth with milk and honey. Only rebel not ye against the Lord. Neither fear ye the people of the land, for they are bread for us. Their defense is departed from them, and the Lord is with us. Fear them not. But all the congregation bade stone them with stones. And the glory of the Lord appeared in the tabernacle of the congregation before all the children of Israel. And the Lord said unto Moses, How long will this people provoke me? And how long would it be that they believe me? For all the signs which I have showed among them, I will smite them with the pestilence, and disinherit them, and will make of thee a greater nation and mightier than they. And Moses said unto the Lord, Then the Egyptians shall hear it, for thou broughtest up this people in thy might from among them. And they will tell it to the inhabitants of this land, for they have heard that thou, Lord, art among this people, that thou, Lord, art seen face to face, and that thy cloud standeth over them, and that thou goest before them by daytime in a pillar of a cloud, and in a pillar of fire by night. Now if thou shalt kill all this people as one man, then the nations which have heard the fame of thee will speak, saying, Because the Lord was not able to bring this people into the land which he sware unto them, therefore he hath slain them in the wilderness. And now I beseech thee, let the power of my Lord be great, according as thou hast spoken, saying, The Lord is long-suffering and of great mercy, forgiving iniquity and transgression, and by no means clearing the guilty, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children, unto the third and fourth generation. Pardon, I beseech thee, the iniquity of this people, according unto the greatness of thy mercy, and as thou hast forgiven this people from Egypt even until now. And the Lord said, I have pardoned according to thy word. But as truly as I live, all the earth shall be filled with the glory of the Lord. Because all those men which have seen my glory and my miracles, which I did in Egypt and in the wilderness, and have tempted me now these 10 times, and have not hearkened to my voice, surely they shall not see the land which I swear unto their fathers, neither shall any of them that provoked me see it. But my servant Caleb, because he had another spirit with him, and hath followed me fully, him will I bring into the land whereinto he went, and his seed shall possess it. So I love this scripture. It is sort of an infamous scripture because, as I mentioned before, 12 spies were sent out to survey the land of Canaan. And again, you had the group of spies that came back with an evil report, and then Caleb sort of standing up and saying, no, this is what it is. And so in the scripture, we see, Caleb and Joshua really coming together to remind Israel who the heck they are and who their father is. And this idea that, no, guys, they don't have the Lord with us. They don't have the God of Israel with them. So there's no way that we can lose. And even warning the children of Israel, let's not anger our God by having this moment of self doubt. Let's not destroy ourselves by letting fear overtake, the goals that we have in place. But as it mentions, the children of Israel don't listen. And it says that they paid stones against them. And so the God of Israel comes, he visits, he's talking to Moses, and he is furious. He wants to wipe out the children of Israel. And Moses, being almost like the diplomat that he is, he's like, God of Israel, look, it's going to seem crazy to the Egyptians for you to have done all these amazing things for these children and then to wipe them out. And God was like, fine, I hear you. You said I'm merciful, I am, but listen here. This generation won't see the promised land. Only Caleb and his generation will be able to possess it. But this one right here that's talking on this mess, they're not. And this is so exemplary of the two sides of the coin. You have one where the fear overtook the spies and caused them to make that evil report. And what's sad is, that fear trickled down to the community. And I think it's really important as Israelites to realize, it's in our DNA to have self-destructive behaviors. All throughout the Bible, we are disobedient and we limit the blessings that the God of Israel is able to give us in return for our obedience. Because of your self-destructive habits, you are blocking that land flowing of milk and honey. You are blocking your prosperity. And so we have to learn the ways in which we can be proactive with our mindset, like Caleb and Joshua were. The verse that really stands out to me is the last one we read, where it says, but my servant Caleb, because he had another spirit with him and hath followed me fully, I will bring him into the land. And what this makes me think of, that term, he had another spirit with him. We have to remember that the spirit can be with us, but that it moves. The spirit moves, and it can leave you, and it can leave Israel. And we don't ever want that to happen. But what it also reminds me of is, having the spirit with you, the spirit of truth, the spirit of understanding, is almost like a mindset. Having the spirit of truth is truly connected to your mindset and the way that you think. Because Caleb had a different spirit, he had a different mindset, a different outlook on the problem at hand that allowed him to act righteously. And we have to do the same thing. The first step, I would say, when it comes to realizing what your self-destructive behaviors are and correcting, is changing your perspective and looking at fear as an opportunity. When you are experiencing fear for launching into a challenge or a new project into your life, you have to look at fear as an opportunity to expand, to grow into something, and not as something that is holding you hostage and keeping you paralyzed. Something I've really learned in the recent years is to learn to tap into fear and to lean into it. As I mentioned before, our emotions are important because they allow us to understand when we're in danger. And so fear pushes us to protect ourselves. But because of that, we have to recognize when this fear is valid, right? When there's evidence that you are in danger, and when this fear is something that is fear because of the unknown, because you haven't discovered it before. That's a good kind of fear in which it's going to lead you down a path that's challenging, but that's going to allow you to self-develop. Personally, I had so much fear launching 66 books. I was so fearful and anxious. It's so nerve-wracking. I don't care how many times I, get used to public speaking. It's just very nerve-wracking to put yourself out on a platform and share your knowledge. And, it took a lot of thought. And honestly, there was a lot of procrastination in the process, because before I filmed my first episode, this had been something I've been thinking about for months and sort of praying, God of Israel, is this what I should do? And I felt like I was getting signs that he was like, girl, go ahead and do this. And I was like, are you sure? Like, there's like a lot of nerves. And, I would send, my episodes to my family members and be like, what do you think of this? Before I sent it in for submission. And, sometimes when I would even hear them like playing the videos, I would be like, turn it down, I don't want to hear it, because it was just like such a fearful process. But ultimately what pushed me to decide to go through with this was the recognition, my tongue is tied today, that this was a good kind of fear for me, and a fear that would allow me to grow and to develop. And ultimately, I'm really happy that I leaned into it. I want to go back to this idea of perspective, which I think Caleb had, a strong holding on. Your mindset and the way that you look at things plays such a huge part in your ability to accomplish the goals that you set out for yourself and be the person that you want to be. It's funny because I was listening to an influencer, and she brought forth a mindset, a way of thinking that I never really thought about, but that I love. And it was this idea that, sometimes the things that you stress about are the things that you once prayed for, are the things that you desired. So for example, because some of y'all might be like, what does that mean, Rachel? It's like, maybe recently you've been stressing about how to manage your money and budget, and you just feel so overwhelmed. But there was a time where you were broke and unemployed. And so this new problem is actually really a blessing. It's a thing that broke you and unemployed you would have loved to have as a problem, was being too overwhelmed to manage the income that you're having now, because at one point you had zero. One of my absolute favorite Saturday messages is the Fallen Angels one that Elder Michael and Elder Andel did a few months ago, because it just really puts into perspective what goes on behind the scenes and spiritually when we are battling things in our lives, or going through a time of like suffering or unknowingness. Knowing that your problems aren't just linked to like maybe like your insecurities or just life, and realizing like, no, like this is an attack from the other side because I'm an Israelite, can sometimes feel your fight and make you realize like, oh no, like I can't just sit down and let life happen to me. Like this is a spiritual warfare that I'm going through, and I need to use my fasting and my prayer and my tools to fight back. Like that mindset shift is so powerful. So that's another tool that I really implore you to think about, is how can you change your perspective on the challenges that you're facing so that you can push against some of those self-destructive habits. Another one for, again, some of my people that maybe get stressed or really overwhelmed or like paralyzed by all the things that they have to do, so they just don't do what they have to do in order to achieve your goals. This has been so helpful for me, and it's to romanticize your life. Okay, so I'm going to give you an example, but essentially romanticizing your life is just making your life more enjoyable, more pleasurable in the everyday things that you have to do, by like adding an incentive to the things that you must be disciplined to do that you don't really want to do. So for me, I was watching another podcast, and this was life-changing. Okay, so for all of my night owls out there that want to be morning people, but you have just been struggling, which was me, right? I wanted to get to a point where I was waking up earlier, at least 7 a.m. before transitioning to maybe even earlier to get up. I was just struggling because I feel like I come alive in the nighttime. I feel like I'm so creative. Sometimes I'm like in bed early and I get like literally mad because I'm like, I could be up doing stuff right now. Like, and even when I would get like 8 to 10 hours of rest at night, I would wake up early and just be groggy and be like, well, why don't I just go back to get bed to get some R&R. Like, it just wasn't happening for me. And so what I realized is you can really work to romanticize your life to make this better. So for example, let's say I want to start waking up at 7 a.m., but it's just not happening. I implore you to romanticize your life. Instead of staying in this self-destructive behavior of procrastinating and not doing what you know you want to do and you have to do to be disciplined and achieve your goals, make it fun. Wake up at 7 a.m. and have a slow morning, okay? Make your favorite matcha latte, okay? Your favorite drink. Go on a morning walk, tidy up your space, have a nice, long, relaxing self-care shower. Maybe you usually do that at night, so now you're going to do it in the morning because you're trying to wake up early in the morning. Listen to your favorite podcast. Make it enjoyable, even if you have to wake up maybe 30 minutes earlier just to do that. Because, going back to perspective, when I was trying to wake up earlier, my thought was, oh, I want to wake up earlier so that I can get to work faster, get organized, immediately get productive, and get on with my day. And to be honest, that wasn't motivating enough. So by waking up a few hours earlier and not having to, go straight to work and get ready and allow me to have a slow morning and be productive in a self-care sense, that's what gave me an incentive to wake up earlier to do the things that I want to do. Another example might be like, okay, the Friday night messages, you haven't been consistent. You started to lose your passion. I'm just going to be honest, sometimes that can happen for myself. There are times where, I sat down and told my mom, like, I'm just feeling very disconnected. Like, the Friday nights aren't doing it to me. I need to revive it somehow. So you can get creative, romanticize your life, and revive it. Maybe go get your favorite meal at your favorite takeout place like Chipotle, put on your diffuser, get your peppermint oils going, take a shower, get in your PJs, purchase a nice cute little journal, notebook, and follow along with the Friday night messages and challenge yourself to comment and engage, to stay active so that you start to make it fun. Or maybe even invite your cousins or your aunties or your sisters out for a Bible study sleepover where you cook a nice big meal and you watch the Friday night message, and then afterwards you have a sleepover and you all drive to morning service the next day. Like, these are the ways in which you can stay disciplined, stay committed to yourself, and be successful even when you don't want to do it. Because a lot of times discipline with things are things that we know would be good for us, but we sometimes struggle to do. And so romanticizing your life is a really great solution that I enjoy doing to help with some of that self-destructive behavior as well. Another solution, if you find that you self-sabotage a lot, y'all know I'm a big advocate for journaling, and so I highly recommend, when you encounter hardships in your life, is to use a cognitive model to really analyze yourself. I've done this before, so I'm going to explain it. But essentially with the cognitive model, when you experience a hard situation, you're going to write out, what am I feeling? What are my thoughts? And what are the behaviors that I want to take impulsively? And then you're going to try to rework and reframe your thoughts and behaviors into something that is positive and that will benefit you. So for example, let's say I'm feeling anxious because my coworker is, placing false blame on me for a project that she failed to do. So if I was going to write out, this scenario, I would write my scenario and I would say, I am feeling anxious and upset. And my thought is, I'm scared I'm gonna, lose my job. And honestly, I want to put this girl in her place, okay? So my behavior, the impulsive behavior that I want to do is, when I go into work tomorrow, I want to tell her how I really feel without holding back anything, okay? I want to tell her exactly how I feel, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and all the words in between, okay? That is the initial process. So you're going to write it out. Then I want you to write out that same model of thinking a second time, but with a more positive outcome. Because again, some of our impulsive behaviors, like confronting our coworker and telling her how we really feel, might not be the most appropriate for us to keep that job security, right? So in my second way of thinking, I might outline, okay, I'm feeling anxious and upset, because again, my coworker is placing false blame on me for a project that she failed to do. So I'm going to change my way of thinking. So my thought now is, I am frustrated because, I am scared that I'm going to lose my job. So in terms of thinking, I need to think about what is the best route to exert my frustration without messing up my job security? So how can I express my feelings, defend myself, while also ensuring my job security is my thought? And so maybe a plausible behavior I'll have is, I'm going to scream it out in my pillow, my frustration while I'm at home. I'm going to pray to my God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, for guidance. And when I go into work tomorrow, I'm going to copy her on an email to my manager, pulling up receipts of messages where we agreed upon work responsibilities and timeline. And so that's a way that you can sort of reframe some of those hard scenarios that you have to make sure that your behaviors are not self-destructive, but are in alignment with the blessings that you want to receive, the blessings that you are supposed to inherit from our God. And so the last solution or tool that I recommend using as well is to ask yourself, what evidence is there to support your thoughts? This goes back to that FEAR acronym that I was talking about, right? False evidence appearing real. A lot of times the things that hold us back from achieving our goals are based on no evidence. And so let's say, right now you have a thought, which is, I'm scared to launch a business because I'm worried it will fail. I want you to ask yourself, what evidence or proof do you have that failure will occur? And I want you to think hard about that. And if you find that there is no solid evidence for that proof, I'm going to ask you to lean into that fear and figure out how you can further develop yourself and treat this new challenge as an opportunity to grow and develop. And on the flip side, sometimes you may actually find evidence. Let's say you started a business in the past and it did fail. Then I want you to go back and analyze the reasons why it failed and come up with better solutions so that you know that you can put in barriers in place so that, that the likelihood of failing is less likely. And then again, we're still going to come to the same conclusion, which is to lean into that fear, trust in your God, and go for it. And so I fibbed a little bit. We're about to wrap up soon, but there's actually another solution that I want to recommend for self-destructive behavior, so the forfeit of self, which is to know yourself. I feel like this episode is almost like a part 2 to be your own best friend, because it's going to require a lot of self-analyzing, but I think it's really important, going back to journaling, is to know what your warning signs are for self-destructive behavior and to write that down. We are human beings and we are creatures of habits, whether that's good or bad. And because of that, we can use it to our advantage to understand when we are falling down the pitfall of self-destruction and when we're doing well. I think I've mentioned this before, but the state of my room is always a tell of how I'm doing in my life and whether or not I'm probably implementing self-destructive behaviors. As I mentioned before, if my room is messy, I know that my life is probably super disorganized right now. I'm rushing around. I'm not getting enough sleep. I am sabotaging myself and my goals because of my lack of organization and self-care. And so my room is a warning sign. It lets me know, okay, you need to reassess. You need to make sure that you're going back on track so you're not the mountain preventing yourself from getting your blessings. So write that down. Take some time to write down wherever some of those warning signs that allow you to be proactive in sort of handling your self-destructive behaviors so that you can negate them and know when it's time to reassess and recalibrate. And there's no better time to do that than the new moon and Sabbath, which is coming up. And so I want to end today's discussion really thinking about what self-destruction looks like in the terms of Israel. As Israelites, we have a tendency to limit ourselves through disobedience and not prioritizing what really matters, which is our God. I think I mentioned this before, but it's in our DNA. All throughout the Bible, we see a habit that's formed where we constantly, reject our God, turn away and seek after other gods, other people, other things. It's interesting because I was on Pinterest the other day and it was talking about spirituality, and the question that was posed is what is your God? And it had examples of things like your romantic partner, your job, your business, and this idea basically that the things we prioritize first are sometimes replacing our God, and so they become our God because we're putting them first. We're prioritizing that overall, and that was like so profound for me, and it was such a check-in because again, like we have to balance a lot as Israelites in a strange land. You know, we have to work to sustain ourselves, and I think it's natural to want to be successful in everything that you do, but it's really important to not fall back into the self-destructive behaviors of our forefathers, because as we see with the story of the 12 spies, it blocks our blessings. And so what I really want to cement with this episode is we have to learn how to work smarter and not harder. So much of the effort that we put into our careers or our businesses or our little hobbies or, you know, even maybe our relationships are taking away from the effort that we could be putting into praising our God. And by praising our God, maybe our careers, our relationships, our hobbies, our businesses would flourish even more so, but we're blocking that blessing by not prioritizing Him. And so talking about this forfeit of self, of losing yourself, I want us to remember when we feel fear to lean into our God, because that is the best way out. And to really take the time to know ourselves so that we can do better and to trust the process. You know, recently I've been going through a stage in my life where I've been trying to make challenging decisions, and a lot of fear has been attached to this, you know, decision that I've been making. But, you know, through prayer and fasting, I feel like I've received such great confirmation and alignment 1,000 times over from the God of Israel that has made this process easier, and that like I know He's got my back. I know He's got my back, and the only thing that I really doubt is my ability to rise to the occasion. But I think, you know, with these episodes, you know, sometimes they're important for me to create because they're a reminder to myself of my own self-destructive behaviors and the way in which I forfeit myself. But, you know, I really want to make sure that we're not blocking our own blessings because we deserve it. We've been enslaved for 400 years, y'all. I'm not trying to go back. I'm really not trying to go back. And after being enslaved for so long, we deserve more. We deserve to walk in our inheritance as royalty, as the royal priesthood of this world. And so I hope that, you know, this episode was enjoyable for you, that you learned, you know, new tips and tricks to help negate some of those self-sabotaging behaviors that are honestly so unfair to you. And so if you enjoyed some of the tips, I ask that you please, you know, like, comment, subscribe to the channel, comment down a self-sabotaging behavior you think you have, and one solution you've either done in the past or that you plan to do to help negate it, so that we can all learn from each other as well. But to wrap things up, I thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. As a reminder, please continue to support the initiatives of this nation by tuning into Friday Night Message every week at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. You know, make it fun. Like I said, you know, maybe coordinate with your fellow brethren to have, you know, a nice big dinner and Friday night viewing party, or maybe get your, you know, favorite Sabbath-friendly meal and make it a whole self-night care day where you watch the Friday Night Message and then get ready to go to your morning service the next day. Also, be sure to tune in every Saturday at 2 p.m. Eastern for the Saturday message. Those have been so great and so fruitful as well. And then be sure to support Phi for the Youth from the Youth, which comes on every other Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern. Thank you again so much for watching me. Be sure to tune in to the next episode because it is a special episode that you will not want to miss. And with that, I bid you peace and good blessings.